It started with a loud pop, followed by the smell of burning plastic. I was mid-weld on a custom steel gate in my garage, visor down, arc blazing, when everything cut out at once. Lights dead. Tools silent. Music gone. I stood there for a second, squinting through the haze, wondering if I'd blown a fuse, until I noticed the small column of smoke slithering up from my circuit box like a guilty child caught red-handed. Now, I take my electrical setup seriously. I've got a solar-fed backup, surge protection, and a ground system that would make any inspector whistle. So when something blows in my garage, it's not just a blown fuse, it's a declaration of war. And in this neighborhood, there's only one person bold and bonkers enough to make such a move. Her name is Karen. Karen lives 2 houses down, just close enough to spy with binoculars and just far enough to deny she's doing it. She runs the HOA like a dictator with a Pinterest addiction, enforces rules that only exist in her imagination, and dresses like she's about to host a yoga retreat or sue someone for breathing incorrectly, sometimes both. She's also the kind of woman who thinks being questioned is a personal attack, and once sent a letter to the entire neighborhood banning inflatable pool toys because they disturbed the aura of the subdivision. So when my garage blew out, I wasn't wondering if Karen was involved. I was wondering how deep she'd gone this time. I started with the basics, checked the fuse box, 2 breakers fried. Opened the conduit to the solar inverter, scorched terminals. But what caught my attention was a strange bend in the conduit leading out back. It wasn't like that before. I followed it past the gravel bed and around my toolshed, where my backup batteries were mounted and locked. And that's when I saw it. Half buried under disturbed mulch was a yellow industrial-grade extension cord snaking off into the direction of Karen's backyard like a runaway garden hose. I crouched, yanked it gently, and it tugged back with resistance. My heart thumped. Oh, she didn't. She really didn't. But oh yes, she did. I marched to the back of my property line and peered through the hedge. There, plugged into an outdoor socket with a ridiculous pink power adapter, was my own stolen cable. It was connected to what looked like a surge protector duct-taped to a rolling charger, charging, of all things, an ATV with the word Karenator stickered on the side in metallic cursive. I kid you not. She had named it. I stared at it for a long second, then turned around and went back to my garage, trying very hard not to laugh myself into a hernia. This woman was siphoning my power to charge her Barbie apocalypse ride. And the best part? She probably thought I wouldn't notice. Now, being a reasonable man, and by reasonable I mean sarcastic and slightly vindictive, I decided to start with diplomacy. The next day, I knocked on her door, greeted by the overwhelming scent of lavender and condescension. Karen appeared in yoga pants and a bless this mess tank top, holding a green smoothie and scowling like I'd just peed in her begonias. I asked if she'd had any electrical work done lately. She blinked like I was speaking Swahili. Then, when I mentioned the extension cord running from my shed to her garage, she lit up with full Karenian fury. That's not mine. I have no idea what you're talking about. And anyway, your wiring is clearly unsafe. I was going to report it to the HOA. Right. Unsafe. The same wiring she was stealing from. I thanked her for her concern and walked away, already knowing exactly what I'd find when I got back. Sure enough, less than a day later, I received a violation notice from the HOA citing hazardous DIY solar configurations and a possible code breach in shared utility easement. Translation: Karen tattled faster than her ATV's battery could charge. That's when I stopped playing nice. I got out my tools, opened every conduit, and traced every inch of wire. And beneath a layer of melted insulation and amateur splicing, I found the smoking gun, or in this case, the soldered power theft. She'd actually dug up my wiring behind my shed, cracked the line open, and attached a second cord that bypassed every one of my meters. It wasn't just theft. It was criminal stupidity with a death wish. And yet somehow, she had the gall to act like I was the problem. I stood there for a moment, holding the ruined cable, Thinking about the fine the HOA had slapped on me, the smug look on Karen's face, and the ridiculous sticker on that ATV. And then, something clicked. You want power, Karen? You've got it. You want to plug into my line? Be my guest. But next time, you better bring a fire extinguisher. Because I was done being the victim. It was time to turn up the voltage, literally. And trust me, this ride was going to get bumpy. It didn't take long for Karen to escalate. After all, she wasn't the kind of person who could resist turning her own bad behavior into a moral crusade. By day 4, her koi pond was heating up nicely on my redirected shock cable. Her gnomes were glowing like radioactive mushrooms, and I guess she felt emboldened enough to let her inner HOA demon off the leash. That's when the letters started. Hand-delivered, naturally, because email lacks the aggressive flourish of a printed HOA warning duct-taped to your front door. The first one read like a deranged love letter to bureaucracy. According to the HOA, I was obstructing cooperative resource distribution and concealing solar infrastructure from community benefit considerations. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Cooperative resource distribution. That's what Karen called theft now. I could practically hear her shrill voice narrating it. We just want to make sure all homeowners are equally basking in the sun. She'd probably trademark that if she could. The second letter came the following morning. This time it had an official HOA seal and a signature from none other than the HOA president himself, one Terrence Whitmore. I recognized the name immediately. Terrence was Karen's cousin, which was both unsurprising and hilarious. He had the charisma of a cold stapler and the authoritarian charm of a DMV line supervisor. The letter stated that, per subsection blah blah of the HOA bylaws, the association would be conducting a visual inspection of solar energy assets for compliance and fair use. In other words, they wanted to snoop around my property to see if I was hoarding sunlight. I'd have rolled my eyes harder, but I was afraid they might get stuck. Still, the inspection posed a real problem. If the HOA started poking around and found the cow fence reroute setup, they might not understand that it was technically legal. I'd made sure it wasn't dangerous, but Karen getting zapped, even lightly, might come across a little unneighborly on paper. So, I did what I always do when entitled people turn up the heat. I cooled down, played calm, and got strategic. First, I contacted the county office and confirmed that the HOA had no legal authority to inspect my solar system without a formal complaint filed through the proper channels. Then I drafted a letter of my own, citing county energy regulations, privacy protections, and a delightfully obscure clause in the HOA's own charter that stated no inspections could occur without a 14-day written notice and a homeowner's consent. I printed it on heavy linen paper and taped it, very respectfully, right next to Karen's last 2 passive-aggressive love note. Then I waited. Again. Karen, unsurprisingly, didn't take the rejection well. She stood on her porch one morning in full yoga gear, arms crossed, glaring at my front door like she was trying to bend reality with her eyeballs. I gave her a polite wave and sipped my coffee like it was laced with schadenfreude. Later that day she knocked. Well, more like pounded. I opened the door and there she was, wearing red leggings, a zip-up fleece jacket, and that same entitled expression that said, "I pay HOA dues, therefore I own your soul." "You're being very difficult," she said without so much as a hello. "Good morning, Karen," I replied cheerfully. "Lovely weather, isn't it?" "Sunny." "Efficient." She didn't laugh. "I have every right to request an audit of your solar system. This community was built on shared values." "I'm sure it was," I said. "Unfortunately, my panels were built on my roof with my money, and the county agrees they're mine." "You're hoarding energy." "Karen," I said, "do you even hear yourself? This isn't a commune in the woods. You can't just stick a wire into someone's property and call it sharing. That's not how electricity, or property rights, work. You left that plug exposed. Anyone could have used it." "That's funny," I said, "because it wasn't exposed. It was sealed and behind a locked inverter cabinet, which you opened. She flinched at that. I could see her processing the fact that I knew she'd messed with the box. Her indignation shifted just slightly into panic. Then she sniffed and went for the nuclear option. I've spoken to Terrence, she said, chin up. We're moving forward with inspection. You'll be hearing from us again. Oh, I hope so, I said. I've got a whole binder ready. And I did. I spent the next 2 days gathering every document, manual, time-stamped photo, and recorded maintenance log on my solar system. I even printed out copies of the wiring diagram for the decoy inverter, labeled clearly as non-functional test unit, which was 100% true in a way that would make any HOA lawyer's brain short-circuit trying to argue with it. But while I played defense on the HOA front, I went back to check on the revenge system. Karen's cord was still plugged in, still drawing voltage, still hooked to the cow fence surge converter. And just to ensure the magic moment would happen, I installed a simple pressure sensor inside a junction box near the line's path, one that would trigger a camera the second someone tampered with the cord. Karen wasn't done stealing, but she was getting greedy, and greed makes people stupid. That night, around 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Shed cam. I sat up in bed like a kid on Christmas morning, pulled up the feed. There she was, Karen, in pajama pants and a headlamp, crouched next to the inverter. She pulled open the box again, barehanded, of course, and grabbed the line to adjust it. I saw her freeze for a half-second before her hair poofed like she'd stuck a fork in a toaster. She yelped and fell backward, her headlamp going dark. In the background, one of her koi leapt out of the pond in terror. The whole thing was glorious. She wasn't hurt, just shocked enough to learn a lesson. I reviewed the footage 3 times, each time rewinding the moment her hand made contact. The best part? Her expression. A perfect cocktail of outrage, confusion, and the slow, dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the victim. At 8 a.m. sharp, she showed up again. This time her hair was still wet, like she hadn't even bothered to dry it before storming over. She banged on my door, shrieking loud enough to wake the chickens. You electrocuted me. I opened the door slowly. I did what now? You wired that thing to shock me. I could have died. You mean the unauthorized cable you ran into my solar inverter? That cord. You set me up. I had no idea you'd try to steal from me again, I said innocently. But now that you mention it, I do have camera footage. Would you like to watch it? She went white. Then she said the dumbest possible thing she could have said. I'm calling the sheriff. That was an attack. An energy-based weapon. Fantastic, I said. Please do. And she did. Right there on my front porch, barefoot, dripping, and still humming with static energy, Karen called the county sheriff and told them she'd been assaulted. By a solar panel. Through a fence. I don't know what she expected to happen, but what actually happened? Well, that was the start of my favorite chapter. Thick, black, angry clouds billowing from the machine. Karen shrieked. Tricia ran for a garden hose. A neighbor screamed. I grabbed my camera and pressed record. The flames were small, but the humiliation was massive. Karen tried to smother it with a towel, but the ATV's battery pack popped like a firecracker. The little, powered by sunshine, sign curled up and fell off the side. Someone finally dragged out a fire extinguisher. Foam sprayed everywhere. It was chaos. Glorious, sooty, electrified chaos. And I just stood there, arms crossed, sipping coffee like it was the best morning I'd ever lived. By the time the flames were doused and the smoke had thinned enough to reveal what was left of Karen's smug little electric war chariot, the scene looked like a budget action movie aftermath. Melted plastic clung to the driveway like roadkill. Her patio umbrella had been knocked over in the frenzy, spraying citronella candles across her lawn. Her friend Tricia stood barefoot, sobbing quietly with a spray nozzle dangling uselessly at her side. And Karen, well, Karen looked like she'd personally inhaled 3 years of pent-up rage and was ready to exhale it in one explosive HOA meeting. I wasn't in a rush to get involved. No need. My cameras had already caught everything. Her trespassing into my property line, plugging into my wiring without permission, ignoring every warning sign, and revving her ATV like she was trying to launch it into orbit. I had footage, timestamps, logs, and receipt. All I needed to do now was sit back and watch the fallout hit her like a collapsing garage shelf. But of course, she didn't take it quietly. 2 hours after the fire, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find the president of the HOA, Leonard Trammell, standing there like someone had just told him their Amazon package got stolen and somehow made it his fault. He was flanked by Karen, her hair now frizzy from heat and hose water, and her lips pulled so tightly into a frown that they looked like parentheses carved into her face. She was holding what was left of her ATV's user manual, as if that proved anything. Leonard cleared his throat like a man about to step on a landmine. "We've had quite an incident," he began, eyes darting from Karen to me and back again. "Mrs. Anders has raised some serious concerns regarding your solar system. She believes it may have contributed to it caused the fire." Karen barked. "He's running some janky, unlicensed, off-the-books fire trap and routing power through my property." I raised a single eyebrow. "Really? Because from my understanding, you're the one who ran a cord across the property line. You've done it multiple times, actually." That's irrelevant. Your system shouldn't have any effect on mine at all unless you're manipulating it deliberately. This is sabotage." Leonard blinked slowly. "Mrs. Anders, if I may, you did say you were using an external line. That's not authorized under HOA code." "I wouldn't have needed to if he wasn't weaponizing his system," she snapped. "He's using it as a tool of intimidation." I leaned against my doorframe, arms folded. "You mean like the HOA fines for my hazardous setup? Or the random citations that started after I caught you digging near my shed?" Leonard cleared his throat again, already regretting the visit. "Look, maybe we just need to calm things down. We should probably bring this to the next board meeting. Collect evidence, review both sides." "I have evidence," I interrupted. "And I'm more than happy to share it with the entire board." Karen's eyes narrowed like she'd just realized she'd stepped onto a chessboard without knowing the rules. "What evidence?" "Security footage. Of you splicing into my line. Twice. Plus a full electrical audit done by a licensed tech who documented irregular surges on your ATV charger originating from unauthorized wiring. Want me to forward it to Leonard now, or should I wait until the board is all together?" Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. Then opened it again, but this time with the expression of someone who just remembered a dentist appointment that conveniently prevented further comment. She turned on her heel and stormed down the walkway, muttering something about lawyers and malpractice. Leonard just sighed and looked at me like I was his last aspirin. "She's going to file a formal grievance," he muttered. "She already tried that once," I said. "Didn't go anywhere." "Yeah, well," he scratched the back of his neck. "This time she's talking about filing it with the city." "Perfect. Because that's when I pulled out the final card I'd been holding, my permit binder. Yes, I had a binder. I'm the kind of guy who treats every zoning law and building code like bedtime reading. My entire solar setup was fully permitted, inspected, and registered with the city's energy department. I even had backup documentation in cloud storage just in case of emergencies, or in this case, entitlement meltdowns. So when Karen tried to go nuclear by escalating to the city, she only managed to draw more attention to the one thing I wanted them to see: her tampering with a private electrical grid. 3 days later, the city inspector arrived. His name was Howard. He looked like he'd been doing this job for 30 years and had long since lost any tolerance for suburban drama. I walked him around my setup, explained everything in calm, professional tones, showed him the permits, the logs, and even the fake inverter I'd left plugged in as bait. His only reaction was a tired grunt and a nod. Then we walked over to Karen's. That was less smooth. Karen tried to dazzle him with fresh lemonade and a folder of printed-out emails she claimed were from online electricians. Howard flipped through the mess like it was a toddler's crayon drawing, then asked to see her garage. She refused. He insisted. She folded. Inside, he found a scorched outlet, a half-melted extension cord, and what appeared to be a daisy chain of adapters worthy of a bad meme. He took photos, made a few notes, then left with the same grunt he'd arrived with. The report came back a week later. Karen had violated 5 separate city ordinances, 2 HOA electrical codes, and possibly committed a misdemeanor by splicing into my conduit. Her ATV had caught fire due to improper charging from an unregulated power source. The city didn't fine her yet, but they issued a formal warning and a citation for tampering with private utilities. The HOA had no choice but to suspend her pending review. Now, a reasonable person might have stopped there. Maybe issued a formal apology. Maybe retreated into quiet shame for a while. Not Karen. Oh no. Her next move was a full-blown lawsuit. She filed a civil claim against me for property damage, harassment, and emotional distress. She claimed the fire was deliberate. She said I'd installed malicious electronics with the express purpose of harming her recreational vehicle and reputation. I wish I were joking. The court date was set for a Tuesday morning. I showed up in slacks and a blazer. Karen arrived in what I can only describe as courtroom chic. Heels, a neck brace, yes, a neck brace, and a manila folder thicker than her common sense. Her lawyer looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The judge, an older woman with no patience for nonsense, asked for opening statements. Karen's attorney mumbled some drivel about neighbor disputes and ongoing stress. Then it was my turn. I stood, handed the judge a USB stick, and said, "This contains video footage of the plaintiff trespassing, tampering with my electrical system, and ignoring written warnings. It also includes a report from a licensed electrician, permit records from the city, and the official inspection report confirming the fire was caused by her illegal connection to my solar array." The judge plugged it in, watched about 3 minutes of footage, then turned to Karen. "Mrs. Anders, is this you in the video with the shovel and the wire cutters?" Karen stammered. I was trying to fix his faulty system. It was a safety hazard." The judge raised an eyebrow. "A safety hazard that you connected to without permission?" Karen flailed. "I didn't know it would catch fire." The judge tilted her head. "You didn't know illegal electrical tampering might cause a fire?" Karen froze. 10 minutes later, the case was dismissed with prejudice. Karen was warned not to file further frivolous suits and instructed to pay for the court fees, both hers and mine. Her lawyer packed up like a man released from purgatory. I walked out into the sunshine, inhaling deeply. There's something poetic about winning a battle with nothing more than patience, logic, and the other person's stupidity. And yet, Karen wasn't done. Because the next morning, I found her standing at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed, staring at her garage. And that's when I realized something that made me grin like a madman. The HOA had just cut power to her house. They'd finally stepped in. Karen's face that morning was the closest I've ever seen to an adult temper tantrum combusting in real time. She stood at the edge of her now utterly powerless kingdom, barefoot, arms crossed, hair pulled back in a tight, vengeful ponytail, staring daggers at the garage outlet that had betrayed her. Her lawn lights were off. Her security cameras blinked with red offline icons. Her power meter had a bright orange tag fluttering in the breeze, courtesy of the HOA's contracted electrician. The sticker read, "Service suspended, code 4, tampering." I sipped my coffee on the porch, watching the sunrise, and waved at her. She didn't wave back. Shocking, I know. Turns out, the HOA board, finally faced with irrefutable proof of Karen's backyard engineering spree, wasn't just embarrassed. They were furious. A few of them were longtime residents who'd grown tired of Karen's iron grip on every landscaping decision, garbage day fine, and passive-aggressive newsletter. Her stunt with the ATV had given them exactly what they needed, an excuse to dig through every HOA bylaw she'd ever bent like warm gum. It was like watching a dictatorship eat itself from the inside. The HOA held a special session the night before. I didn't attend. I didn't have to. But I had friends on the board, and the texts were glorious. Apparently, once my footage was played, complete with a slow-motion zoom on Karen's stealth wiring job, the room was silent. Then someone, one of the quieter board members, asked, "So how exactly is he the villain again?" Karen had shown up in a neck brace, again, which she dramatically removed once she realized no one was buying the story. By the time the meeting ended, she was suspended from all HOA duties, her vote revoked, and her garage officially flagged for external inspection. The power cut wasn't my doing. That was all on them. But oh, how poetic it felt! Her house, which once glowed with seasonal lighting 5 months too early and blared top 40 hits during every backyard yoga class, now sat dark and silent like a grounded teenager sulking through a blackout. No more charging ATVs. No more siphoning voltage. No more self-righteous smugness. Just quiet. The kind of quiet I hadn't heard since before she moved in. But, as always, Karen wasn't one to go quietly into the night. Or the morning. Or anything. By that afternoon, she had 3 electricians at her house, all arguing near her circuit panel like they were trying to solve a bomb puzzle. One of them pointed at the tag. Another shook his head and walked off. The last guy stayed, arguing with her on the phone while sweating through his polo shirt. I didn't even have to eavesdrop. I could read the stress lines on his forehead from my kitchen window. It didn't take long for Karen to come knocking again. This time, she didn't even bother with fake civility. She jabbed a finger at my chest the second I opened the door. "I know what you did," she hissed. "This is all your fault. You sabotaged my property and you're playing the victim." I blinked slowly. "You mean when you cut into my power system, caused a fire, filed a fake lawsuit, and now can't even legally run a toaster in your own home?" "I'm filing a motion," she snapped. "You'll be hearing from my new lawyer." I leaned on the doorframe and smiled. "Good. Make sure he brings electrical certification this time." She stormed off, of course. It's her signature move. But I wasn't about to let her spin the narrative, especially not with a new legal clown in the picture. So I made one final move of my own, a little something for the neighborhood. I printed flyers. Classy ones. No sarcasm. No blame. Just facts. Titled, "Solar Safety Notice," the sheet detailed how Karen's unauthorized tampering could have endangered not just her home, but nearby properties too. I included a few stills from the footage, blurred her face, "I'm not a monster," showed where the illegal splicing occurred, and reminded everyone that energy theft wasn't just reckless, it was criminal. I didn't put them in mailboxes. That would have broken actual laws. No, I just posted one on the community board by the mailbox cluster. It was gone within an hour, which meant someone, probably Karen, had snatched it. So I printed 5 more. Laminated them this time. One went up by the park, one near the HOA meeting hall, and one mysteriously showed up on the HOA president's own door. Karen's reputation, already flickering, was now in full outage mode. The next twist came at the HOA's emergency review hearing. Karen, to her credit, showed up dressed like she was going to court, funeral, and battle all at once. Black blazer, pointed heels, binder full of what I assume were deflection tactics and made-up bylaws. But this time, the board had done their homework. They pulled up every fine she'd issued under false pretenses, including the one she slapped on me for hazardous solar panels. They uncovered a paper trail of email complaints she'd written under fake aliases. One board member even had screenshots of Karen logging into the HOA portal to reject permit requests just because she didn't like the tone of someone's landscaping plan. It was a full unraveling. She tried to argue, tried to cry, even tried the neck brace again, mid-meeting. Nobody bit. When the vote came, it was unanimous. Karen was removed from the board, banned from issuing complaints for a full year, and forced to pay back $3,800 in misappropriated fines, some of which, sweetly, was headed right back into my pocket. The HOA president apologized to me publicly and even offered to refund the original citation for my shed wiring. I took it, and I donated half of it to the local fire department. It felt fitting. But here's where the universe decided to really have fun. Just when I thought the saga was over, just when Karen had finally been stripped of her petty powers and left to stew in the remains of her melted ATV dream, she made one last desperate move. A tantrum disguised as generosity. She tried to donate the burnt-out ATV to the neighborhood teen center. I found out because a kid I mentor in the robotics club called me up, half laughing, half terrified. "Hey, Mr. J, Ms. Anders dropped off an ATV here? Said it was environmentally innovative, and that we could use it for parts. But it smells like a toaster exploded inside it." I drove down immediately. There it was. The Karenator 2.0, now missing its wheels, with a scorched seat and a Powered by Hope bumper sticker taped over the melted original. It had been hauled into the rec center garage like some cursed artifact. I called the director, explained the situation, and by sundown, it was gone. No one really knows where it ended up. My guess? Scrapyard. Or maybe Karen's backyard again, as a sad monument to ego and failure. As for me, I finally got around to finishing the steel gate project I'd started before all this began. Welded it perfectly, under full power, with no sparks flying from anything that wasn't supposed to spark. It swings open silently, solid and strong. Right above it, I mounted a sleek little plaque. It reads, "Private property, unauthorized access will be energized." Most folks think it's a joke. Karen doesn't. I still see her sometimes, glaring from her now dimly lit windows. She walks past my house a lot more quietly now, headphones in, arms crossed, pretending not to notice that I still have full power, a functioning security system, and the support of every neighbor who ever got fined for planting a tulip too close to the sidewalk. And the best part? Every time someone new moves into the neighborhood and asks about that melted patch on her driveway, they always get the same answer. "Oh, that's the spot where Karen's ATV caught fire after she stole power from the solar guy." It's become legend. The neighborhood had changed. Not physically, mind you. The same houses still stood in their pastel suburban sameness, the HOA park still had the same slightly tilted bench, and the mailboxes still squeaked like dying chipmunks every time someone opened one. But the atmosphere had shifted. There was a lightness now, like a storm had finally blown over and left the air clean. Karen was no longer the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. The silence from her house wasn't just electrical, it was social. The gossip vine had dried up, her weekly HOA bulletins had ceased, and the once dreaded knock of her clipboard had gone extinct. People were reclaiming their yards, painting their doors whatever colors they wanted, and even one brave soul planted bamboo in full view of Karen's window. A power move in every sense. As for me, I was riding the high of a well-earned win. My garage had never looked better. The custom steel gate now stood proudly across the drive, freshly painted in matte black, with automatic openers synced to my solar grid and backup batteries. I'd even added a tiny weatherproof screen that displayed real-time solar generation data, mostly for my own amusement. That gate had become my personal monument to patience, precision, and poetic justice. But the best reward wasn't monetary or mechanical, it was reputation. People stopped me on walks to ask if I was the guy from the Karen fire story. Some asked if it was true she'd been electrocuted. It wasn't. Others said she claimed I'd hired hackers to destroy her ATV remotely. I hadn't, but I appreciated the imagination. The story had taken on a mythic quality. Everyone seemed to add their own seasoning to it. I just nodded and let them have their fun. Why ruin a good legend with facts? Still, I knew Karen wasn't finished. People like her don't fade quietly. They linger like bad software, always trying to reinstall themselves under new aliases. True to form, a few weeks after the court case ended and the HOA removed her privileges, she tried worming her way back into the fold. First it was a community wellness initiative she emailed about, offering free granola bars and something called spiritual voltage realignment. Then it was an online petition to modernize energy protocols in the HOA bylaws. No one signed. Then came the final Hail Mary. She tried to run for HOA president again. She dropped flyers on every doorstep in the neighborhood. Tastefully pastel, professionally printed, and completely detached from reality. They claimed she was the victim of targeted energy harassment, that the HOA had been hijacked by anti-environmental radicals, and that her leadership would restore harmony between man and megawatt. I picked mine up from the porch, stared at it for a moment, then dropped it straight into the recycling bin, face down because dignity still matters. Election day came. I didn't campaign. I didn't need to. I just showed up, nodded to the current board, and dropped my ballot in the box. Karen did show up though. She wore a blazer over a t-shirt that said, "Power to the people," and gave a 5-minute speech that somehow compared her situation to Galileo. No one clapped. One guy coughed loudly, and that was the most support she got. The vote tally wasn't close. The board president, Leonard, read the results with a deadpan face. Karen Anders received 3 votes. A pause. One appears to be a write-in for nope. That got a laugh. Even Tricia, her ever-faithful sidekick, didn't crack a smile. After that, Karen finally stopped trying. Her yard went a little wild, grass longer than usual, weeds popping up around the stone borders she'd once measured with a ruler. Her motion lights stopped working. The house dimmed in every sense. Occasionally, I'd see her sitting on the porch, staring off like a war veteran haunted by the ghosts of HOA meetings past. But fate still had one last punchline left in it. One morning, I got a call from a city inspector named Dave. He said someone had submitted a request to review my property's wiring again, an anonymous complaint. I could guess who. Dave asked if he could come by to perform a spot inspection, just to check the boxes and close the report. I said sure. He arrived that afternoon, clipboard in hand, and walked through every inch of my solar grid, backup systems, inverters, and grounding. Whoever submitted this complaint said your system causes dangerous electromagnetic interference, he said, raising an eyebrow. They also mentioned something about psychological disruption from energy waves. I laughed. Was there any mention of alien frequencies? Not directly, but it was implied. He passed the inspection with flying colors. Before he left, he said, "Funny thing is, we also had to check on her property again. Seems she tried to set up a makeshift charging station in her shed. No permit. Just a chain of old car batteries wired together with lamp cords." I blinked. That's not just dumb. That's a garage fire waiting to happen. Dave nodded. Which is why we shut it down. Karen had gone full Frankenstein, building her own DIY electrical monstrosity in secret. Maybe she thought it would be her comeback moment, reclaiming energy independence in glorious, smoldering victory. Instead, she'd earned another citation and a final note in her file, prohibited from further independent electrical installations pending psychiatric review. And just like that, the story ended the way it began, with wires, fire, and Karen looking absolutely stunned that actions have consequences. The last time I saw her was a month later. She was walking down the street with a paper grocery bag, no makeup, no sunglasses, no clipboard. Just her and whatever thoughts buzzed around that beehive of entitlement she called a brain. As she passed my gate, she looked up, locked eyes with me, and for a fraction of a second, I thought she might say something. Apologize. Nod. Acknowledge reality. Instead, she just looked away and kept walking, her bag tearing slightly at the corner as she rounded the block. And me? I went back to work. I've since upgraded the gate. It opens with a voice command now. I've added surge protection 5 layers deep. My solar grid sends alerts to my phone whenever it detects even the faintest fluctuation. I call it my Karen protocol. I even considered putting up a fake squirrel statue with a little antenna, just to keep her paranoid. But I decided that would be overkill. Mostly, what I did install was a new sign. Sleek metal, black background, etched in silver. It reads, "Powered by intelligence, not entitlement." Every neighbor who passes by gives it a chuckle. Some take pictures. One even asked where I ordered it, said she had a nosy aunt who needed the reminder. And just last week, the HOA invited me to speak at the next community meeting, not as a defendant, not as a scapegoat, but as an advisor on green upgrades and neighborhood security. It's funny how things change. One moment you're just trying to weld a gate. The next, you're the guy who made an entitled ATV arsonist the symbol of suburban karma. I never raised my voice. I never broke the law. I never struck first. All I did was let the current flow naturally, right back where it came from. In the end, Karen wanted power. And she got exactly what she deserved. Burnout. The satisfying kind.